All right, place your bets and put your comments down below. How many times am I going to say Tricube Tables by mistake in this video? Hello, nuts and nerds, and welcome back to a Squirrel Plays. Today we're going to be reviewing Tricube Tactics, and I'm excited because I've been wanting to get to this one since it dropped. If you're completely new to the scene and wondering what it is, Tricube Tactics is an add-on to Tricube Tales in case you wanted some more crunch to your combat and character customization. But we will get into all that in a bit. First, I gotta lay out what we're gonna do here. This review will be a little different than the past couple I've done since it's not a standalone game. So with that in mind, I think it'll go a little something like this. Part 1 will be the what is it section. Part 2 will be a little chat about character creation. Part 3 will go over some of the combat differences between tactics and tales. And then part 4 will be some of my overall thoughts on it, as well as some words about the experience I had with it during play. So yeah, part 1, let's go. All right, so what is Tricube Tactics if it's not a standalone game? Basically, it's a set of optional rules for Tricube Tales. And if you don't know what Tricube Tales is, it's a very straightforward rules-like game that uses D6s. In short, every challenge you come across is either a 4, 5, or 6, and your character will roll either 1, 2, or 3d6, depending on their archetype, perks, quirks, and concept. It's a very open-ended, free-flowing game that focuses on storytelling and roleplay. There's a little more to it than just that, but that is the basics. It's a great little game you can easily pick up and play, and it is totally free over on DriveThruRPG if you want to check it out. It's made by Richard Woolcock, also known as Zadmar in the online spaces. And speaking of Zadmar, he has this to say in his Tricube Tactics book. While Tricube Tales worked great for one-shots, I started to miss the tactical combat and variety of character customization from other games I'd run, particularly Savage Worlds. I gotta play that one of these days. I wondered if it were possible to incorporate similar options into Tricube Tales without the game mechanics becoming too complex, so I decided to find out. He then goes on to explain that Tactics is not a standalone system and does require the base rules from Tricube Tales, but it is a way to essentially add more crunch. Crunch. And on the next page, he has this little bit about cherry-picking rules that I really appreciate. Basically, he's telling you to use what you want and that it's not an all-or-nothing deal, and I think that's pretty cool. Tricube Tactics was actually more complex than I expected when I first looked over it, but as I studied it and we actually got to playing, well, actually, I'll talk about that at the end of the video after we go over everything else. I got a lot to cover on this one, so let's see if we can't do a little bit of speed running. All right. So in Tricube Tales, character creation is easy peasy lemon squeezy. You have to pick an archetype, a perk, a quirk, and also come up with a concept. Perks and quirks are the easiest because they can be whatever the heck you want. Metal arms, sure, that's a perk. Squirrel tail, also a perk. Squirrel brain, that one's probably a quirk if I'm being honest. Speaking of, the quirks work the same way. They're whatever you want them to be. Your archetype, on the other hand, is either agile, brawny, or crafty, and is combined with your concept, which is similar to perks and quirks in the sense it's whatever you want, and is just a simple descriptor for your character. A couple examples right from the game manual are a brawny knight of noble upbringing with a strict code of honor, and an agile journalist with spider-like superpowers and propensity for cracking jokes.
Eventually they will hate you. Why bother?
Because it's right.
And when I say that's all there is to it, that's really all there is to it. Super simple stuff, and it works. But what about Tricube Tactics? For starters, your archetypes are now split into 3 sub-traits. For example, Agile is divided up into Stealth, Dexterity, and Reflexes. When you create your character and pick your archetype, you will automatically get all 3 of its sub-traits, but as you advance your character and level up, you can start branching out into other sub-traits from other archetypes. So if you were an agile little squirrel, such as myself, and you leveled up, you could pick up the Charisma sub-trait from the Crafty archetype. Take note, though, that 6 is the total number of sub-traits you can have, including the 3 you start out with. and you only get the option to pick another subtrait every second level up, and that's only if you don't want more HP or more karma or more minions. So it's not something you just get for free. On top of that, you will also have to pick a combat style, which, surprise, surprise, has been divided up into 3 substyles each. Melee is now armed, unarmed, or parry, ranged is shoot, throw, or evade, and mental is direct, indirect, or resist. These work just like the subtraits in the sense you get your main 3 at character creation and can choose to branch into them every other level up. In Tricube Tales, your character got 3 HP, or resolve as the game calls it, and 3 karma points. In Tactics, you still get that, as well as a knack, or 1 minion token. Oh no, sir. Gow, dang! Like and subscribe. And what are knacks, you might be wondering? In Zadmar's words, I wanted to offer abilities with different mechanics as well as flavor, but I still wanted to follow the no laundry list principle. And that's what gave us knacks, which, surprise, surprise again, are divided up into 6 types each with their own rules. And to give you an idea of what we're looking at, I'll read this part right from the manual. Players can name their knacks just like they do with their perks and quirks, and then note the type and any other specifics in brackets. For example, longbowman, and then in the brackets, reroll shoot, is a reroll knack that applies to shooting a longbow. Complex, yet simple at the same time. And if we take a little bit of a closer look at these knacks, we'll see some unfamiliar terminology, but do not worry, we will get to that in a bit. Action knacks allow a character to perform one specific simple action as a swift action. Edge knacks, which come in the form of melee, ranged, and negate, can double some of your combat bonuses. Freeform knacks have to be thematically tied to a specific perk, but can be used to create temporary knacks or minions at the cost of karma. So forth and so on. Hopefully you get the idea by now that knacks have a lot of wiggle room to be flavored by the player, but still come with some of their own specific mechanics to make them function instead of just some vague and abstract dice roll between 4 and 6. The book gives you a list of examples, but ultimately it is up to you to decide. It's your character after all. And that is only a very brief overview of them, but I don't want to get too far off into the weeds because we do have more stuff to cover. Speaking of, I think it's time to move over into some combat changes. In regular old Tricube Tales, combat was very straightforward. When attacking or defending, the challenge roll was always going to be 4 or 5 or 6. If the player was doing something they were terrible at or struggled with, they rolled 1d6. If they were okay at it, 2d6. And if they were good at it, 3d6. And that was pretty much it. No complaints here because I actually really like that approach. And if I'm not mistaken, your actions were simply move and attack. So over here in Tactics Land, your character is able to take 3 actions every round. A standard action, a simple action, and a swift action. Interestingly enough, your actions can also be downgraded. A standard action can be downgraded to a simple action, and a simple action down to a swift action. This allows you to do certain types of actions multiple times in one turn, and I think that's pretty interesting. Technically, there's also free actions, but they're very loose and pretty much just do what you want so long as it makes sense. Standard actions are attack, escape, retrieve an item from your bag, or a stunt, which allows you to perform various special maneuvers such as pin, shove, or intimidate. Simple actions are aim, cast, dash, frenzy guard, mount, prepare, protect, quaff, which I thought was a new word for me, but I think I might have actually had that one stuffed way back in the back of my noggin. Ready, recover, reload, retreat, and stand. Swift actions are charge, rush, sprint, and swift strike. As for movement, your distances are measured in strides, with each stride being about 2 long steps. The average character has a movement speed of 3. This means they can do 3 strides per round. You can use the dash or sprint actions as well to get a lot more movement covered in a single turn. But here's something I really appreciated from Zadmar. When it comes to your movement and measuring that out on a battle map or something, he gives you options. His movement speeds and distances work with both square grids and hex grids, and he also gives you rules for using abstract zones and range bands. So that's pretty neat. Now, while we're still talking about movement, there are encumbrance rules. If you are encumbered, your movement is reduced by 1. Being heavily armored can also reduce your movement by an additional 1. As for what is and isn't considered encumbered, that's up to you and your table. though there are some specific things that force this condition on you, such as heavy ranged weapons. There are also terrain rules to consider when moving about. Difficult terrain costs twice as much movement to cross, and that's an important thing to note. If you're playing on a grid, only leaving the square counts as crossing it. Hazardous terrain requires players to roll when entering or exiting. Failing can result in falling over or losing 1 HP, or both, with the difficulty raising or lowering depending on the speed they travel through the terrain with. And yes, terrain issues do also affect enemies and NPCs. For initiative, you get to make a roll through a reflexes challenge. If you succeed, you get to go before the NPCs. If you fail, you go after the NPCs. However, if you were to roll an exceptional success, you also get to act in the surprise round, which takes place before regular combat. So that's neat. A critical failure will cause you to lose your standard action in the first round, so that's not so neat. I mean, it is until it happens to you. And I'm going to make a little note on the damage here, and then I think I'm going to start wrapping this up. The book says attacks eliminate 1 effort token, which is enemy HP, for each die that equals or exceeds the foe's difficulty. And this is the part I really want to highlight. The same as in Tricube Tales. I was taken aback when I read that because I completely missed that in the Tricube Tales book, so I went back and looked. But sure enough, page 20, each die to equal or beat the difficulty removes a token. I thought it was just 1 damage and then maybe 2 on a crit or something. Speaking of Tricube Tales though, there was a fun rule I really liked from that game that does carry over into Tactics, and that's making players only roll their defense once per round, regardless of the number of enemies attacking them. I know that seems like you're hitting the easy mode button for the players, but really, I've played Tricube Tales both with and without that rule, and I've also used that in a lot of nuts testing, and really, it doesn't make things easier because you can just raise the difficulty accordingly. It does, however, drastically speed things along and keep people from feeling like they're overwhelmed. But anyway, that's just something that I really liked. And as I mentioned before, your challenge rating in Tricube Tales was always 4, 5, or 6. In Tactics, there are things you can do to get it all the way down to 3, or even 2 if you spend karma, or all the way up to 7 in the hardest of situations. When that happens, rolling a 6 on 2 dice is considered a normal success, and rolling 6 on 3 dice is considered an exceptional success. That means you're just up the creek without a paddle if all you can do is roll 1 die. There's still a lot in Tactics that I didn't cover, such as player and creature sizes, some of the other knacks. I didn't get into minions at all, nor did I even talk about the enemies and the way they're structured. Unfortunately, there's only so much time, and a lot of you are probably wondering, well, did you even enjoy it? I did enjoy it, very much so. Zadmar sells Tricube Tactics as an additional layer to Tricube Tales, but I gotta be honest with you, man. This isn't just an additional layer, it's a whole daggum lasagna. So much so that I do honestly wonder if this is still considered a rules-light game or not. But there's a thing or two I'd like to point out before we depart. First off, I neglected to mention that the PDF is complete with bookmarks and snazzy as ever, but I think we've all come to expect that level of quality from Zadmar. The second thing is the way the information is presented. And this happened in Tricube Tales as well for both me and Mr. Pro GM Jacob, who, by the way, plays multiple systems every week, so he's used to bouncing around and reading new rules. Tricube Tales is incredibly simple, but we were still confused about things after reading the manual. Tricube Tactics is obviously more complex and has a lot more going on, but after reading it a couple times, we were just as confused as we were with Tricube Tales. I will readily admit that my intelligence stat is not the highest, and I'm probably not the best metric to use, but when a professional GM has the same experience and issues as I do, then it's safe to say there's something there that needs to be looked at. Now, everybody is going to take in and digest information differently. When I read EZD6 the first time, I was confident I could run it with mostly success. The only thing I really missed was that one line about karma not being able to be used on magic stuff. Despite Tricube Tales being simpler than EZD6, I didn't have near the level of confidence as I did with EZD6. So imagine how I was with Tricube Tactics. And my theory here is that all it is the order of which the information is presented. Everything is there, usually in a well-explained and only a single line. It's just a matter of finding it and seeing it as you're progressing through the book. But other than that, man, we had a great time. There's a 2-session stream we had over on Avenue Studios. The first session is in Tricube Tales, and the second session continues the same story, but switches over to Tricube Tactics rules. While there was combat in both, we really didn't get much into the nitty-gritty of tactics because when that second session hit, our party was completely falling apart and we were all ready to kill each other. I mean, I have never seen such a dysfunctional party before. It was a good time. So I do highly encourage you to go over and watch those streams, both to see how the two games work and look and play, but also just for some good laughs because it was an absolute mess, but in a good way. Jacob nailed it like always. And that's the end of my ramblings. Zadmar, thanks so much for making all the things you do. I love Tricube, both Tales and Tactics. Your solo rules are super fun too, but I think my absolute favorite thing you do are the one-page settings. I've used those multiple times to get ideas spinning for a few different things, including some Tricube games. So much good stuff in there. As for the rest of you, go pick up the game. The phone PDF is free if you want, as is Tricube Tales, but if you enjoy it, I do highly encourage you to throw some money Zadmar's way. Holy shit, did I make it through this whole video without saying Tricube Tables?